The dust had barely settled on Thomas Oliver's grave when the banker came knocking, and Lorraine Oliver knew her world was about to crumble all over again. She stood on the porch of the small homestead outside Riverton, Wyoming, her black mourning dress already faded from the harsh summer sun of 1878. The fabric clung to her thin frame, and she could feel her ribs pressing against the bodice. Food had lost its appeal 3 months ago when the fever took Thomas, leaving her alone at 24 years old with nothing but memories and mounting debts she had not known existed. The banker, a portly man named Henderson, cleared his throat and shuffled the papers in his hands. "Mrs. Oliver, I understand this is a difficult time, but your husband's debts must be settled. The ranch supplies, the seed he purchased last spring, the loan he took for the cattle that died in the winter storms. It all comes to nearly $800. $800 might as well have been $8,000. Lorraine felt her knees weaken but forced herself to remain upright. "I have $43 to my name, Mr. Henderson. Everything else went to the doctor and the funeral. Then I am afraid we will need to discuss the property." His voice was not unkind, but it was firm. Business was business, even with widows. Lorraine nodded slowly, her throat too tight for words. She had known this was coming. The homestead was small, just 80 acres of stubborn Wyoming earth, but it had been hers and Thomas's dream. They had married young, full of hope and plans. Now those dreams lay buried beside her husband in the cemetery on the hill. "I will need 30 days, she finally managed, "to decide what to do." Henderson hesitated, then nodded. "30 days, Mrs. Oliver, but not a day more. I have a responsibility to the bank." After he left, Lorraine sank onto the porch steps and allowed herself to cry. Not the silent tears she had shed at the funeral, but deep, wrenching sobs that came from a place of utter despair. She was alone, nearly penniless, and about to lose the only home she had known since leaving Ohio 4 years ago. The sound of approaching hoofbeats made her wipe her eyes quickly. She did not want visitors, did not want sympathy or platitudes. But when she looked up, she saw an unfamiliar horse and rider approaching slowly, as if the stranger sensed this was not a good time for sudden movements. The man who dismounted was tall and lean, with sun-darkened skin and eyes the color of creek water in spring. He removed his hat, revealing dark brown hair that needed cutting, and approached with a measured stride. Something in his posture spoke of a man who had seen both beauty and hardship in equal measure. "Madam," he said quietly, "I am looking for Thomas Oliver. I heard he might be looking to hire on ranch hands." Lorraine felt a fresh wave of grief crash over her. "Thomas died 3 months ago. There is no work here. There is barely a here anymore." The stranger absorbed this information with a slight nod, his expression sympathetic but not pitying. "I am sorry for your loss. My name is Logan Matthews. I have been working spreads up in Montana, but I wanted to head south before winter comes again." "Well, Mr. Matthews, as I said, there is no work here." Lorraine stood, ready to retreat into the house and its familiar emptiness. "Madam, I can see your fence is down in 3 places just from the road. Your barn door is hanging crooked, and those chickens in your yard look like they have not had proper feed in weeks. Now, I do not mean to presume, but it seems to me you could use some help whether you can pay for it or not." Anger flared in Lorraine's chest, hot and unexpected. "I do not need charity, Mr. Matthews. I need a miracle, and those seem to be in short supply. Good day." She turned to go inside, but his next words stopped her. "I am not offering charity. I am offering work in exchange for meals and a place to sleep in your barn. I have been riding for 3 weeks, and I am tired. A few days of rest while I help set your place to rights seems like a fair trade." Lorraine turned back slowly. "Why would you do that?" Logan Matthews met her eyes and she saw something there she recognized, a deep well of sadness that matched her own. Because once, a long time ago, someone helped me when I had nothing. I figure it is time I passed that kindness along. She should have said no. She should have sent him away and dealt with her problems alone, the way she had been dealing with everything since Thomas got sick. But there was something in his steady gaze, something that made her feel less invisible than she had felt in months. "The barn has a decent loft," she heard herself say. "I can offer breakfast and supper, but nothing fancy. Madam, anything that is not hardtack and jerky sounds like a feast to me." That was how Logan Matthews came to stay, and how Lorraine's carefully constructed walls began to show their first cracks. The next morning, Lorraine woke before dawn as she always did, though there was hardly any reason for it anymore. She made coffee and biscuits, setting out enough for two without really thinking about it. When Logan appeared at the kitchen door just as the sun was painting the sky pink and gold, she gestured for him to enter. They ate in silence, but it was not uncomfortable. Logan had the manners of someone raised properly, and he cleaned his plate without making a mess. When he finished, he stood and carried his dishes to the wash basin. "Thank you for the meal, Mrs. Oliver. I will start with the fences today." "There is no wire," Lorraine said. "I cannot afford to buy any. I saw some old wire tangled in the brush on the east side. I can salvage enough to patch the worst spots. It will not be pretty, but it will hold your cattle if you had any." "I do not have cattle anymore. They died last winter, or so Thomas told me before he got sick. I think the worry of it helped put him in the grave." Logan nodded slowly. "Still, good fences make a place look cared for. That matters when it comes time to sell, if that is what you are planning." "I do not know what I am planning, Mr. Matthews. I only know that in 30 days the bank will take this place if I cannot pay $800, and I have no idea how to conjure that kind of money from thin air." She had not meant to tell him all that, but the words spilled out before she could stop them. Logan considered her for a long moment, his expression thoughtful. $800 is a lot of money," he agreed, "but it is not impossible. What skills do you have, Mrs. Oliver?" The question surprised her. "I can cook, so keep a house. I can read and write. I taught school for a year back in Ohio before I married Thomas." "Riverton has a school." "Yes, but they already have a teacher. Mrs. Penelope Wright has been teaching there for 6 years. "What about sewing?" "Seems to me a town that size could use a dressmaker." Lorraine shook her head. "There is already a seamstress, Mrs. Chen, and she does beautiful work. I could not compete with her. Then we need to think of something else." He said we so naturally that Lorraine almost did not notice. "I will work on the fences today. You think about what you might be able to offer that this town needs. Sometimes opportunity hides in plain sight." He left then, and Lorraine watched him walk toward the barn to collect tools. There was a quiet confidence in the way he moved, a sense of purpose that she envied. She had not felt purposeful in so long that she had forgotten what it felt like. The day passed slowly. Lorraine did her usual chores, tending to the chickens, washing clothes in the creek, sweeping floors that barely needed sweeping. But her mind kept returning to Logan's question. What could she offer? What did Riverton need? By the time evening came and Logan returned to the house, dusty and tired but with 3 sections of fence mended, she still had no answer. "I made stew," she said, ladling it into bowls. "It is not much, just potatoes and onions and a little bit of salt pork, but it is hot. It smells wonderful." Logan sat down and bowed his head briefly before eating. Religious, then, or at least respectful of the gesture. Thomas had always said grace, too, before the illness took his faith along with his strength. "I have been thinking all day about what you asked," Lorraine said, surprising herself again. and I cannot think of a single thing I could do that would make $800 in a month." "What about baking?" Logan asked. "These biscuits this morning were the best I have had in years, and this stew, simple as it is, tastes like home. People pay good money for that feeling." Mrs. Harrison already sells pies at the general store. "Does she sell bread?" "Good, fresh bread every morning." Lorraine paused. "I do not think so. I know people mostly bake their own or go without." "There is your opportunity." Men working the ranches, the miners passing through, the railroad workers, they do not have time to bake bread. But they would pay for it if someone offered. Fresh bread, maybe some sweet rolls or cinnamon buns. You could sell them in town or to the workers directly. The idea took root in Lorraine's mind, fragile but persistent. I would need supplies: flour, sugar, yeast, and I would need a way to transport everything to town. "How much money do you have left?" $43. Logan was quiet for a moment. "That is enough to start. We buy supplies, you bake, I help you sell. We split whatever profit there is after expenses." "Why would you do that? You said you were only staying a few days." He looked at her directly, and again she saw that deep sadness in his eyes. "Because running does not solve anything, Mrs. Oliver. I have been running for 2 years, ever since my wife and daughter died of cholera in Kansas. I thought if I kept moving, the grief would not catch up to me, but it always does. Maybe it is time I stopped running and did something useful instead." Lorraine felt her chest tighten. Here was someone who understood, truly understood, the weight of loss. "I am sorry about your wife and daughter. And I am sorry about your husband, but sorry does not pay debts or put food on the table. Action does. So what do you say? Are you willing to try?" She thought about it, really thought about it. The idea terrified her. She had not left the homestead except for essentials since Thomas died. The thought of going into town, of facing people's sympathy and curiosity, made her want to retreat into the house and lock the door. But what choice did she have? "I will try," she whispered. "God help me, I will try." Logan smiled then, the first real smile she had seen from him, and it transformed his face. "That is all anyone can do, Mrs. Oliver. Just try." The next morning they rode into Riverton together in the old wagon. Lorraine had not driven the team in months, so Logan took the reins while she sat beside him, acutely aware of how it must look. A widow, barely out of mourning, riding with a strange man. She could already imagine the whispers. But Logan seemed oblivious to such concerns, or perhaps he simply did not care. He kept up a steady stream of conversation, pointing out landmarks, asking about the town's history, making her laugh despite herself when he told a story about a mule he once knew that could pick locks. At the general store they purchased flour, yeast, sugar, and lard. The clerk, a young man named Timothy, eyed them curiously but said nothing beyond normal pleasantries. Lorraine counted out the money carefully, watching her savings dwindle. "You are making a mistake," Logan said softly as they loaded the supplies into the wagon. Lorraine's heart sank. "What do you mean? You bought the cheap flour. For bread you are going to sell, you need quality flour. People can taste the difference." He went back into the store and returned with 2 sacks of premium flour. "Trust me on this." It cost an extra $3, money she could not really afford to spend. But something in Logan's certainty made her nod in agreement. On the way back, they stopped at the railroad camp about 5 miles east of town. Crews were laying track, pushing the line toward the mountains, and dozens of men were living in temporary shelters, doing backbreaking work for modest pay. Logan approached the camp foreman, a grizzled man with a thick Irish accent named O'Brien. "Sir, the lady here makes the finest bread in Wyoming. Fresh baked every morning, delivered right to your camp. A nickel a loaf or 3 sweet rolls for a dime. Interested?" O'Brien looked skeptical. I got 40 men here, miss. Can you handle that kind of volume? Lorraine's voice shook slightly, but she met his eyes. I can have 40 loaves ready by sunrise tomorrow, Mr. O'Brien. If your men like them, I can deliver every day except Sunday. Make it 50 loaves, O'Brien said. And throw in some of those sweet rolls. My boys work hard. They deserve something good for breakfast. As they drove away, Lorraine felt something shift inside her, a tiny spark of hope she had thought extinguished. 50 loaves. That is 250 cents. $2.50 for one day's work. Less the cost of supplies, Logan reminded her. But yes, if you can keep that up, you will have your $800 in plenty of time. I have never baked 50 loaves in one day. Then I guess tonight we find out if you can. They worked through the afternoon and long into the night. Logan kept the fire going in the stove, kneaded dough when Lorraine's arms gave out, and shaped the loaves with surprising skill. My mother ran a boarding house, he explained when she asked. I grew up in the kitchen. By midnight, they had 50 loaves rising in every available space in the small house. Lorraine's back ached, her hands were raw, but she felt more alive than she had in months. When Logan caught her swaying with exhaustion, he guided her to a chair. Rest for a bit. I will watch the first batch. I cannot ask you to do that. You are not asking. I am offering. There is a difference. Lorraine meant to rest for just a few minutes, but when she woke, dawn light was streaming through the window and the kitchen smelled like heaven. Logan stood at the stove, pulling the last batch of golden brown loaves from the oven. Why did you let me sleep? She demanded, scrambling to her feet. Because you needed it, and because I have been baking bread since I was 10 years old. These turned out fine, see. He held up a perfectly formed loaf, its crust crackling and beautiful. Lorraine felt tears prick her eyes. Thank you, she whispered. Thank you for all of this. Logan set down the bread and looked at her seriously. You do not need to thank me, Mrs. Oliver. I told you I am not offering charity. I am getting 3 good meals a day and a dry place to sleep. That is payment enough. But they both knew it was more than that. Something was growing between them, fragile and uncertain, like the first green shoots after a long winter. Neither of them named it, not yet, but it was there nonetheless. They loaded the wagon with the bread and sweet rolls, covering them with clean cloths to keep the dust off. The drive to the railroad camp took an hour, and by the time they arrived, the men were just stirring, ready for breakfast and another day of brutal labor. The bread sold out in 15 minutes. Men pressed coins into Lorraine's hand, praising the quality, asking if she could bring more tomorrow. One older worker, his face weathered by years of outdoor work, bought 3 loaves and hugged them to his chest like treasure. This reminds me of my mother's bread, he said, his voice thick with emotion. I have not had anything this good in 10 years. On the way back to town, Lorraine counted the money. $2.55, plus an extra 20 cents from men who had insisted on paying more. It was not a fortune, but it was a start. Over the next 2 weeks, they fell into a rhythm. Every afternoon and evening they baked. Every morning they delivered to the railroad camp. Word spread, and soon they had orders from the town as well. The owner of the Silver Dollar Saloon wanted 20 loaves a week. The boarding house took a dozen every other day. Even Mrs. Harrison, the pie maker, ordered 4 loaves for her own family. Lorraine's days became a blur of flour and yeast and the constant heat of the oven. But for the first time since Thomas died, she fell into bed each night with a sense of accomplishment. The jar where she kept the money grew heavier. After 2 weeks, she had nearly $150. Logan worked just as hard delivering bread while Lorraine baked the next batch, mending things around the homestead in his spare moments, chopping wood, fixing the barn door and replacing boards on the porch that had rotted through. He never complained, never asked for more than she offered, but his presence became essential to her days. It was dangerous, she knew, to rely on him. He had said he was only staying a few days, yet here he was 2 weeks later, still sleeping in the barn loft, still sharing meals with her, still making her laugh with his stories. She found herself watching for him in the mornings, found excuses to extend their conversations, felt her heart lift when he smiled at her. But every time those feelings grew too strong, she remembered Thomas. Good, kind Thomas, who had loved her with his whole heart and died too young, leaving her alone. How could she think of another man when Thomas had been gone less than 4 months? What kind of wife did that make her? One evening, as they worked in the kitchen, Logan must have sensed her inner turmoil because he set down the bowl he was mixing and spoke quietly. "You are thinking about your husband." It was not a question. Lorraine kept her hands busy with the dough, unable to meet his eyes. "I think about him all the time. How can I not? You should think about him. He was your husband. You loved him." "Then why do I feel guilty every time I laugh at something you say? Why does it feel like a betrayal to enjoy myself, even for a moment?" Logan moved around the table until he was standing beside her. He did not touch her, but she could feel the warmth of him, solid and real. Because grief is complicated and it makes us feel things that do not always make sense. But I can tell you what I learned, what I wish someone had told me. Your husband would not want you to stop living. He would want you to heal, to find joy again, to move forward. How can you know that? Because that is what I would have wanted for my Sarah if I had been the one to die instead of her. I loved her enough to want her happiness, even if it meant she found it with someone else. Did your husband love you that way? Lorraine finally looked up at him, tears streaming down her face. Yes, he loved me that much and more. Then honor that love by living, Mrs. Oliver. Not by burying yourself alongside him. He went back to his mixing then, giving her space to absorb his words. And slowly, very slowly, something in Lorraine's chest began to loosen. The guilt did not disappear, but it became something she could carry instead of something that crushed her. The 3rd week brought unexpected challenges. A rival baker, a man named Sykes who ran a bakery in town, began spreading rumors that Lorraine's bread was made with inferior ingredients. When that did not work, he lowered his prices, trying to undercut her. Several of her town customers switched to Sykes, drawn by the cheaper rates. Lorraine felt panic rising. She had $240 saved, but she needed $800. Losing customers now could ruin everything. "We adapt," Logan said when she told him. "The town customers are not our main income anyway. The railroad camp is, and we can expand to the ranches. There are 5 big spreads within a day's ride. Cowboys eat a lot and they hate camp cooking. We offer them fresh bread and sweet rolls delivered twice a week. They will pay." "That is a lot of extra riding." "I can handle it. You just keep baking." So they expanded. Logan rode out to the ranches, charming the cooks and foremen with his easy manner and Lorraine's excellent bread. 3 of the 5 agreed to regular orders. The Bar J Ranch alone ordered 30 loaves twice a week. The money kept accumulating. $260, $300, $350. Lorraine began to believe they might actually make it, but success brought its own problems. Sykes, furious at losing business, confronted Lorraine in the general store one afternoon when she was buying more supplies. "You think you are clever, do you not?" he snarled, backing her against the shelves. "Coming into my town, stealing my customers." "I am not stealing anything," Lorraine said, trying to keep her voice steady. "People choose where they buy their bread. You are a fraud, a woman playing at business. When you fail, and you will fail, Everyone will remember that I warned them." A hand landed on Sykes's shoulder and Logan's voice cut through the tension. "I think you need to step back, friend." Sykes spun around, his face red with anger. "This is none of your concern, Drifter. The lady is my business partner, so yes, it is my concern. Now, you can either apologize to Mrs. Oliver and walk away, or we can take this outside and settle it another way. Your choice." For a moment, Lorraine thought Sykes would choose violence, but something in Logan's calm demeanor must have convinced him otherwise. He muttered a half-hearted apology and stormed out of the store. "Thank you," Lorraine said, her hands shaking. "Are you all right?" "I am fine. Just angry. Who does he think he is, threatening me like that? A man whose pride is hurt. Those are often the most dangerous kind." Logan picked up the bag of flour she had dropped. "Come on. Let us get you home." That night, Lorraine could not sleep. She kept replaying the confrontation, kept thinking about how Logan had stepped in without hesitation. He could have ignored it, could have let her handle it herself, but he had not. He had defended her, protected her, just as Thomas used to do. The comparison made her uncomfortable. She was not supposed to be thinking of Logan in the same breath as Thomas. Yet here she was, lying in bed, remembering the way Logan's hand had felt on her shoulder that morning when he steadied her after she nearly dropped a tray of loaves. Remembering the sound of his laugh, the way his eyes crinkled at the corners. Remembering how safe she felt when he was near. "I am too sad to love," she whispered to the darkness. "I am too broken. It is too soon." But her heart, traitorous thing that it was, did not seem to agree. The next morning, Logan was unusually quiet. They worked side by side in the kitchen, but the easy conversation that usually flowed between them was absent. Finally, as they loaded the wagon, Lorraine could not stand it anymore. "Have I done something to upset you?" Logan looked startled. "No, why would you think that? You have barely said 2 words all morning." He was quiet for a long moment, his hands stilling on the rope he was tying. "I have been thinking about leaving." The words hit Lorraine like a physical blow. "Leaving? But we are so close. Another week and we will have enough money to pay the bank." "You will have enough money. You do not need me anymore, Mrs. Oliver. You have built a successful business. You are going to be fine." "But I thought—" She stopped, unsure what she had thought. That he would stay forever. That whatever was growing between them meant something. "I thought we were partners." We were. But I have been here almost a month, and that is longer than I have stayed anywhere since Sarah died. I do not want to overstay my welcome." Lorraine felt anger surge through her, hot and cleansing. "Is that what you think? That you are not welcome here? I think you are a widow in mourning who deserves to grieve without some drifter complicating your life. You do not get to decide what I deserve, Mr. Matthews. I decide that. And I say that you leaving right now would be the worst thing that could happen." The words tumbled out before she could stop them. "I need you. Not just for the business, but for everything. You make me want to get up in the morning. You make me remember what it feels like to be alive. If you leave now, I think it might actually break what is left of my heart." Logan stared at her, his expression unreadable. "Mrs. Oliver, Lorraine, I cannot be a replacement for your husband. I do not want a replacement. I want you. You, Logan Matthews, with your sad eyes and your kind heart and your terrible jokes. You, who taught me that it is possible to survive grief without dying inside. Is that so wrong? You are still mourning." "I will always mourn Thomas. He was my first love, and I will carry him with me forever. But that does not mean I have to stop living. You said so yourself." "I am choosing to live, Logan, and I am choosing you if you will have me." The silence stretched between them, heavy with possibility. Then Logan crossed the space between them in 3 quick strides and cupped her face in his work-roughened hands. "I am afraid," he admitted. afraid of losing someone again, afraid of not being enough, afraid that this is all some dream and I am going to wake up alone. Lorraine placed her hands over his. I am afraid too, but I am more afraid of letting fear stop me from reaching for something good. Stay, Logan, please stay. He kissed her then, gently at first as if she might break. But Lorraine was not breaking anymore. She was healing, knitting herself back together with threads of hope and possibility. She kissed him back with all the emotion she had been holding inside, all the fear and grief and desperate, fragile joy. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Logan rested his forehead against hers. I will stay. For as long as you will have me, I will stay. Promise? I promise. I am done running. The bread delivered itself late that day, but nobody seemed to mind. The final week before the bank deadline passed in a blur of baking and deliveries and stolen moments. Logan and Lorraine grew easier with each other, more comfortable with casual touches, with shared glances, with the growing certainty that what they had was real. They did not hide their affection when they went into town, though Lorraine was acutely aware of the stares and whispers. She knew what people were saying, that she was moving on too quickly, that it was disrespectful to Thomas's memory. But she held her head high and held Logan's hand, and eventually most people got used to the sight. Mrs. Henderson, the banker's wife, was the first to openly approve. She stopped Lorraine outside the church one Sunday, laying a gentle hand on her arm. My dear, I want you to know that I think you are very brave. Life is short and none of us are promised tomorrow. If you have found someone who makes you happy, do not let small-minded people take that from you. Thank you, Lorraine whispered, tears pricking her eyes. That means more than you know. On the 28th day, Lorraine counted the money one final time. $873. They had done it. Logan swept her into his arms and spun her around the kitchen, both of them laughing like children. You did it. You saved the homestead. We did it, Lorraine corrected. I could never have done this without you. The next morning, they dressed in their finest clothes and drove into town together. At the bank, Mr. Henderson looked surprised to see them, and even more surprised when Lorraine counted out $800 in coins and bills onto his desk. Mrs. Oliver, I confess I did not think you would be able to raise this sum. Neither did I, Mr. Henderson, but it seems I am more capable than I knew. She pushed the money toward him. That settles the debt in full, correct? Henderson counted carefully, then nodded. Yes, indeed. The debt is paid and the property remains yours. He prepared the paperwork, and Lorraine signed with a hand that barely shook. When it was done, she owned the homestead free and clear. Outside the bank, Logan pulled her into an embrace right there on Main Street. How does it feel to be a woman of property? It feels like a new beginning, Lorraine said. Then, gathering her courage, she asked the question that had been burning in her heart. Logan, what are your plans now? The debt is paid. You could leave if you wanted to. I would understand. Logan took her hand, lacing their fingers together. I made you a promise, remember? I am done running. Besides, I have been thinking. A homestead of 80 acres is a good size for a cattle operation. With the money you have left over and what I have saved, we could buy a small herd, build it up over time. That is, if you want a partner in that venture too. Are we still talking about cattle? Maybe not entirely. Logan's expression turned serious. I know it has only been a month, and I know you are still healing from losing your husband. I do not want to rush you into anything. But I also do not want to pretend that what I feel for you is anything less than love. So I am asking, Lorraine Oliver, if you would consider letting me court you properly. With dinners and walks and all the respectable things people do when they are figuring out if they suit each other for the long term. Lorraine felt her heart swell. I already know we suit each other, Logan Matthews. But yes, I would very much like to be courted properly. I think I deserve that, and so do you. Then let me start by asking if you would do me the honor of having lunch with me at the hotel restaurant. They serve a very good pot roast, or so I hear. I would love to. They walked down Main Street arm in arm, and if people stared, Lorraine no longer cared. She had survived loss, built a business from nothing, saved her home, and found love when she thought her heart was too broken to hold it. She was stronger than she had ever imagined possible. The courtship that followed was sweet and slow, and everything Lorraine had not known she needed. Logan took her on picnics by the river, brought her wildflowers, sat with her on the porch in the evenings while they watched the sun set over the mountains. They talked about everything, their childhoods, their dreams, their losses. Logan told her about Sarah and their daughter Emma, who had been only 3 when the cholera took them both. Lorraine told him about meeting Thomas at a church social, about their hopeful journey west, about the slow, cruel way the fever had stolen him from her. You think they would approve? Lorraine asked one evening. Thomas and Sarah, I mean, do you think they would be happy for us? Logan considered the question carefully. I think they would want us to be happy, period. Whether that happiness includes each other is secondary. But yes, I believe they would approve. Love is not a finite resource. Loving someone new does not diminish what we felt before. I used to think my heart could only hold one person, Lorraine admitted. Now I realize it is bigger than I knew. There is room for Thomas's memory and for you, room for what was and what could be. That is all any of us can ask for. As summer faded into autumn, they continued the bread business but scaled it back to a manageable level. Logan purchased a small herd of cattle, 20 head of good stock that they ran on the homestead's grazing land. He proved to be as skilled with animals as he was with everything else, and the cattle thrived under his care. Lorraine kept the house and managed the books, tracking every expense and income with careful precision. The business provided a steady income, and slowly they began to improve the property. A new roof for the barn, glass windows for the house instead of oiled paper, small luxuries that made the place feel more like a home. In October, as the aspens turned gold and the air grew crisp, Logan asked Lorraine to take a walk with him. They climbed the hill behind the house, up to the place where Thomas was buried. Lorraine had not been back since the funeral, could not bear it, but Logan took her hand and gave her the courage to face it. Thomas's grave was simple, just a wooden cross and a border of stones. Lorraine knelt and placed the flowers she had brought, tears streaming silently down her face. I am sorry I have not visited, she whispered. I was too angry at you for leaving, too sad to bear it, but I need to tell you something and I need to say it here. She took a shaky breath. I loved you, Thomas. I will always love you. You were good and kind, and you deserved so much more than the hand life dealt you. But I am still here, and I am choosing to live. I have met someone, and I think you would like him. He is a good man, like you were. He makes me laugh, and he makes me feel safe. I hope you can forgive me for moving forward, but even if you cannot, I have to do it anyway. Thank you for the time we had. Thank you for loving me. I will never forget you. Logan stood a respectful distance away, giving her privacy for her grief. When she finally stood and walked back to him, he opened his arms and she walked into them gratefully. Thank you for bringing me here, she said into his chest. I needed that. I know you did. They stood there for a long time, watching the wind move through the grass, listening to the distant call of geese heading south for winter. Then Logan spoke, his voice carefully neutral. Lorraine, I need to ask you something, and I want you to think carefully before you answer. There is no rush and there is no wrong answer. She pulled back to look at him. What is it? Would you marry me? Not right away, not until you are ready. But someday, when enough time has passed and you feel right about it, would you consider becoming my wife?" Lorraine's breath caught. She had known this was coming, had felt it building between them, but hearing the actual words still shook her. "Yes," she said simply. "Not right away, like you said. I need time to make peace with everything, to be sure I am doing this for the right reasons. But yes, Logan Matthews, when the time is right, I will marry you." Logan kissed her then, slow and deep, a promise of all the days to come. And standing there on the hill with her past and her future all around her, Lorraine felt something she had not felt in a very long time. She felt whole. They waited until spring to marry, giving Lorraine a full year of mourning and giving both of them time to be certain. The town gradually accepted their relationship, helped along by the fact that Logan proved himself to be a hard-working, honest man who treated Lorraine with obvious respect and affection. The wedding was small, held in the church with only a few close friends attending. Lorraine wore a pale blue dress she had made herself, and Logan wore a new suit he had purchased in Cheyenne. Mrs. Henderson cried through the whole ceremony, and even Mr. Henderson looked misty-eyed. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, Logan lifted Lorraine's veil with hands that shook slightly. "Hello, Mrs. Matthews. Hello, Mr. Matthews. Shall we start our life together? I thought we already had." They spent their wedding night in the hotel in Riverton, a luxury they allowed themselves for this one special occasion. In the morning, they returned to the homestead, to the life they had been building together. The first year of marriage was not without challenges. They argued about money, about how to run the ranch, about small domestic issues that all couples face. But they learned to communicate, to compromise, to choose each other even when it was difficult. And slowly, the homestead transformed from a place of grief and struggle into a true home. In the spring of 1880, Lorraine discovered she was pregnant. The news terrified and thrilled her in equal measure. She had wanted children with Thomas, but the timing had never been right, and then he was gone. Now she was 31 years old, carrying Logan's child, and she could not stop smiling. Logan was equally delighted and nervous. "What if something goes wrong?" he asked, his face pale. "What if I lose you like I lost Sarah?" "Then you will survive it, just like you survived before," Lorraine said firmly. "But that is not going to happen. I am healthy and we have good medical care in Riverton now. Dr. Morrison is excellent. Everything is going to be fine." She was right. On a bright December morning, Lorraine gave birth to a healthy baby boy. They named him Thomas Logan Matthews, honoring both the past and the present. When Logan held his son for the first time, tears streamed down his face. "I thought I would never have this again," he whispered. "Thank you. Thank you for not giving up on love," Lorraine replied, exhausted but happier than she had ever been. "Thank you for showing me that sadness does not have to be the end of the story." They fell into the rhythms of parenthood, trading off nighttime feedings, marveling at every smile and milestone. The bread business continued on a smaller scale, and the cattle herd grew to 50 head. They hired a young ranch hand named Billy to help with the heavy work, giving Logan more time to spend with his family. Thomas grew into a bright, curious child with his father's eyes and his mother's smile. When he was 2, Lorraine found herself pregnant again. This time, she gave birth to a daughter they named Sarah Grace, after Logan's first wife. It felt right, honoring the woman who had come before while welcoming this new life. The years passed in a blur of work and joy and the thousand small moments that make up a life. They added rooms to the house as the family grew. They built a better barn and planted an orchard. They made friends in town and hosted dinners and became part of the fabric of Riverton's community. On their 5th wedding anniversary, Logan took Lorraine back up to the hill where Thomas was buried. The wooden cross had been replaced with a proper stone marker, thanks to Logan's quiet efforts. "I wanted to thank him," Logan said, standing before the grave, "for loving you so well that you knew what real love looked like. For giving you the strength to keep going even when everything seemed impossible. I would not have you if not for the foundation he helped build. So thank you, Thomas Oliver. I promise to take care of her for the rest of my days." Lorraine slipped her hand into Logan's, tears running down her face. "I think he would be happy to know I found you. I think he would be glad I did not let sadness win. You still feel sad sometimes. Of course, some losses never fully heal, but the sadness is different now. It is gentler, like an old friend who visits occasionally instead of a constant companion. You helped make that possible, Logan. You brought joy back when I thought it was gone forever." Logan pulled her close. "We brought joy back to each other. That is how it works, I think. We save each other." That night, as they lay in bed with their children sleeping down the hall and the sound of cattle lowing softly in the distance, Lorraine thought about the journey that had brought her here. From the devastation of loss to the terror of debt to the slow, sweet unfurling of new love. It had not been easy. There had been days when she wanted to give up, when the weight of everything seemed too heavy to bear, but she had not given up. She had chosen to try to keep going, to believe that something better waited on the other side of grief. And here she was, 5 years later, with a husband she loved deeply, 2 beautiful children, and a home that was truly hers. "I am so glad you stopped at our gate that day," she whispered into the darkness. Logan's arms tightened around her. "So am I. Best decision I ever made." They drifted to sleep wrapped in each other's arms, the past and present woven together into something new and strong. Outside, the Wyoming wind sang through the grass, and the stars wheeled overhead, and the little homestead glowed warm against the vast darkness of the prairie. Time moved forward, as it always does, bringing changes both welcome and challenging. When Thomas was 6 and Sarah was 4, Lorraine gave birth to twins, 2 boys they named Daniel and James. The house rang with laughter and arguments and the constant noise of a large family. Logan built bunk beds and added another bedroom, and somehow they made it all work. The cattle operation grew prosperous. Logan had an eye for good stock, and his careful breeding program produced healthy calves that sold well at market. By 1890, they were running over 200 head on land they had expanded through careful purchases from neighbors looking to sell. They were not wealthy, but they were comfortable, and that was more than enough. Lorraine eventually stopped the bread business entirely, her time consumed by the children and the endless work of running a household. But she did not mind. She had proven to herself that she was capable of anything she set her mind to. That knowledge was worth more than any amount of money. The children grew, as children do. Thomas inherited his father's way with animals and his mother's head for business. Sarah was quiet and thoughtful, always with a book in her hand. The twins were wild and reckless, keeping their parents constantly on their toes. Logan and Lorraine raised them with love and discipline, teaching them the value of hard work and honesty and kindness. Sometimes, usually late at night when everyone else was asleep, Lorraine would sit on the porch and think about the woman she had been when Logan first arrived. That broken, desperate widow who could not see a way forward. She barely recognized that woman now. Life had changed her, hardened her in some ways and softened her in others, until she had become someone new, someone stronger. Logan would often join her on those nights, settling into the chair beside her with a comfortable silence. They did not always need words anymore. After years of marriage, they could communicate in glances and touches, in the simple presence of being together. "You have any regrets?" Logan asked her one night when she was particularly reflective. Lorraine considered the question carefully. I regret that Thomas died so young. I regret the hard years we struggled before we found each other. But everything that happened made me who I am now. So no, I do not think I regret the journey, only some of the harder parts of it. That is a wise way to look at it. What about you? Do you regret anything? I regret the time I wasted running from my grief instead of facing it. But if I had not run, I would not have ended up here, so maybe even that was necessary. Life is strange that way. The worst moments often lead to the best ones. I am glad your running brought you to me. So am I, love. So am I. The years continued their steady march. The children grew into teenagers, then young adults. Thomas married a rancher's daughter from the neighboring spread and built a house on the eastern section of the property. Sarah shocked everyone by announcing she wanted to attend college in Laramie, but they supported her decision even though it meant she would be far from home. The twins, inseparable as always, decided to try their hand at mining in the mountains, much to their mother's worry and their father's quiet pride. Logan's hair turned gray, and Lorraine's face gained lines around her eyes and mouth from years of smiling. They slowed down, leaving more of the ranch work to Thomas and the hands they employed. But they were healthy and content, surrounded by the life they had built together. In 1905, on a warm spring evening much like the one when they first met, Logan and Lorraine sat on their porch watching the sunset. They were both 70 now, though Lorraine swore Logan did not look a day over 50. Thomas and his wife had just left after Sunday dinner, and the house was quiet again. "You remember the first thing I said to you?" Logan asked suddenly. Lorraine smiled. "You asked if Thomas was hiring ranch hands, and you told me he was dead and there was no work, but you stayed anyway." "Best decision I ever made," Logan said, as he had said 1,000 times over the years. "Even though you tried to send me away. I was too sad to love, or so I thought, and I said I would bring joy back. You did. You absolutely did." Logan took her hand, his grip still strong despite his age. "I love you, Lorraine Matthews. I have loved you from almost the first moment, and I will love you until my last breath and beyond. I love you too. Thank you for not listening when I tried to send you away. Thank you for seeing past my sadness to the person I could become. Thank you for every day we have had together." They sat in comfortable silence as the sun painted the sky in shades of pink and gold. In the distance, they could hear cattle moving in the pastures. Closer, the sound of birds settling in for the night. It was peaceful and perfect, an ordinary evening made extraordinary by the simple fact of being together. "We did all right, did not we?" Logan said softly. "Built a good life, raised good children, loved each other well. We did better than all right. We did magnificently." As darkness fell and the stars began to appear, one by one, Lorraine thought about the long road that had brought them here, the grief that had nearly destroyed her, the courage it took to try again, the unexpected gift of finding love when she was certain her heart was too broken to hold it. She had learned that sadness does not have to be permanent, that even in the darkest moments, joy can find a way back in. That love is not a finite resource but something that grows and multiplies, making room for old memories and new hopes in equal measure. The cowboy had promised to bring joy back, and he had kept that promise. Not through grand gestures or dramatic rescues, though there had been elements of both. He had brought joy back through small, steady acts of kindness, through showing up every day, through choosing her again and again, even when she was at her worst, through believing in her when she had forgotten how to believe in herself. And she had learned to receive that joy, to accept that wanting happiness was not a betrayal of what she had lost. She had learned that the human heart has an infinite capacity for love, that honoring the past did not mean sacrificing the future. "Thank you," she whispered into the twilight, though she was not sure if she was speaking to Logan, to Thomas, to God, or to the universe itself. Maybe it did not matter. Maybe gratitude worked the same regardless of who received it. Logan squeezed her hand gently. "What are you thanking me for now?" "Everything. Absolutely everything." As the stars multiplied overhead and the Wyoming night wrapped around them like a familiar blanket, Logan and Lorraine sat together on the porch of the home they had saved and built and filled with love. They had weathered storms and celebrated triumphs. They had raised children and built a legacy. They had taken two broken hearts and made them whole again. The widow had been too sad to love, but the cowboy had refused to accept that. He had seen past her grief to the strength beneath. He had offered partnership instead of pity, respect instead of rescue. And slowly, patiently, with the steady persistence of water wearing down stone, he had helped her remember what joy felt like. Now, decades later, they sat in the house that nearly was not theirs, surrounded by the evidence of a life well lived. Photographs on the walls showed their children at various ages, their grandchildren just starting to arrive. The ranch spread around them, prosperous and well-maintained. Inside, the kitchen where they had baked hundreds of loaves of bread still smelled faintly of yeast and cinnamon. It had all started with a simple question from a stranger on a difficult day. "I am looking for Thomas Oliver. I heard he might be looking to hire on ranch hands." And Lorraine, drowning in grief and debt, had told him to go away. But Logan Matthews had not gone away. He had stayed. He had helped. He had loved her back to life. That was the real story, she thought. Not the dramatic rescue or the race against time to save the homestead, though those things had happened. The real story was about a man who saw a woman in pain and decided to stay, who offered his hands and his heart and his stubborn refusal to let her give up, who kept his promise to bring joy back, not through magic but through the everyday miracle of showing up and caring. And the woman, for her part, had found the courage to try, to bake bread and sell it, to accept help, to open her broken heart one more time, to believe that maybe, just maybe, there could be happiness on the other side of grief. Together, they had created something beautiful, something neither of them could have built alone. And that, Lorraine thought, was what love was really about. Not replacing what was lost, but building something new from the pieces that remained. Not forgetting the past, but refusing to let it consume the future. "It is getting cold," Logan said eventually. "Should we go inside in a minute? I just want to sit here a little longer." So they sat, hand in hand, as they had sat countless times before and would sit countless times again. The wind whispered through the grass, carrying the scent of sage and wildflowers. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote called out, its voice lonely and wild and free. Lorraine closed her eyes and breathed deeply, taking it all in. This moment, this life, this love. She had nearly lost everything, had stood on the edge of despair and looked into the abyss. But she had stepped back from that edge. She had chosen life, chosen love, chosen joy. And joy had chosen her right back. When they finally went inside, Logan helped Lorraine from her chair with the gallantry he had shown from the very beginning. They checked the doors and banked the fire and climbed the stairs to the bedroom they had shared for over 25 years. The routine was familiar and comforting, a dance they had perfected through repetition. As they settled into bed, Logan pulled Lorraine close. "I am glad you let me stay," he murmured into her hair. "I am glad you insisted." They fell asleep that way, wrapped around each other. Two people who had found their way home through grief and courage and stubborn, persistent love. Outside, the stars wheeled through the endless Wyoming sky. The cattle slept in their pastures. The homestead stood solid and strong, a testament to what could be built when two broken people decided to heal together. The widow had said she was too sad to love. The cowboy had said he would bring joy back. And together, they had created a love story that proved both of them right and both of them wrong. She had been sad, almost too sad, but not quite. And he had brought joy back, not through his own power, but by helping her find it within herself. That was the true magic of their story. Not the dramatic rescue or the race against time, but the slow, steady rebuilding of two lives into one. The patience to wait for healing. The courage to try again. The wisdom to know that love does not erase pain but gives you someone to carry it with. Years would pass, and eventually, their story would end the way all stories do. But the love they built would remain, passed down through children and grandchildren, a legacy more valuable than land or cattle or money. They would be remembered not for their struggles but for their triumph. For refusing to let sadness win. For choosing joy again and again, every single day. And on quiet evenings when the wind blew just right across the Wyoming prairie, you could almost hear it echoing in the air. The sound of laughter from a kitchen filled with bread and hope. The murmur of two voices talking long into the night. The gentle, persistent rhythm of two hearts learning to beat as one, the widow and the cowboy. Two broken people who refused to stay broken. Two lonely souls who found each other and built something beautiful from the ruins of their grief. It was not the ending either of them had planned, but it was the ending they deserved. And it was, in every way that mattered, a happy one.